Holder here, Humor Mill TV, sitting down with one of my most favorite actors in the world, and I say that all the time, but this one is for real. This is Mr. Lance Reddick. You probably know him from The Wire, Fringe, a lot of other TV shows, and all kinds of great things that are really dramatic, but I'm sitting here with him for some special things that we're going to talk about just shortly. First of all, Lance, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty good.
Nice to meet you. First of all, thank you for coming on the set. I appreciate you taking out the time.
That's my pleasure.
I'm going to go back because, like I said in the intro, I'm a big fan of The Wire. I first have to ask you, man, what was it like working on an experience of a show like that? What was the experience?
Wow, I mean, The Wire was one of those things where, first of all, you know, it's so funny because I feel like most of my career has been about doing stuff that I never intended to do.
Right.
So when I became an actor, I never wanted to do television. I only wanted to do theater and film. And so when The Wire, when I first got the opportunity to audition, it's the only pilot that I've ever read that I felt like I have to be on the show. It was that good. And then when I was cast, and the whole process of actually getting cast as Lieutenant Daniels is a story in and of itself, but it was so well thought out and well organized that when we were shooting the pilot, David Simon came up to me and he said, I'm trying to talk to all the people who are all the leads in the show and tell them, kind of give them the background of the characters and where they're going. Well, your character is based on this guy, and he gave me the biographies of those guys. And he said he's moving toward becoming this by the end of the 5th season, and I have a 60-episode story arc planned.
Wow. So that probably makes sense on why the show was probably so good from the first one to the last one, because you had an idea.
Yeah, and also, I mean, so there was that. And then there's just something that David, and if you watch, you know, because David Simon and Ed Burns, they also, who co-created The Wire, also did The Corner. They wrote the book together, and then they produced and wrote the miniseries. And it's got the same feel. And the thing about The Wire is that it's so real, it almost looks documentary.
Right.
And it's not just the look of the show, but it's the style of the acting and the way that it's written.
From the transcription of the show, you could see how obviously they try to make it as real as possible. I know that you have a project with Spike Lee. Can you tell everybody out there how it was working with Spike and what the project's all about?
The name of the project is The Oldboy, and actually it's I want to say it's a remake of a 2003 Korean film, but it's actually a whole nother spin on it, Spike Lee spin. And it stars Josh Brolin, and wow, working with Spike. In some ways, it was just one of those experiences where he just knew so much what he was doing, and in that regard, he moved so fast. You know, being an insecure actor, you know, I have a tendency to want to check in with the director to see how I'm doing. And Spike's one of those directors where he generally doesn't say much unless you're doing something he didn't like. It was just fascinating to see how in sync he was with the crew and how well he communicated with actors.
But anyway, theater background trained, correct?
Yep.
Comedian, comedic actor, you dibbled and dabbled in a lot of comedy. First thing I have to ask, first thing that jumps out at me is what made people out there even would think would be your interest in comedy? Because when we look at you, we think dramatic actor, we think that, it looks like you're really interested in comedy. Is that a correct statement?
I'm really interested in doing comedy now. Funny thing about it is, I did a lot of comedy in theater school. You know, when I was first making the rounds in New York, when I first got out of school, I went on as many pilots for comedies as I did for dramas. It's just that the drama thing kind of stuck.
So it was as a comedic actor or as a stand-up or doing sketches?
No, because stand-up is that's a whole nother art form in and of itself. Right. That's, yeah, to me, those guys are like magicians. But as a comedic actor, and how I kind of got onto this comedy train over the last 2 years was really just me telling my manager, you know, I want to do something funny. And he really had to, I did an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia about 1.5 years ago. And, you know, he really had to fight like a bulldog to get the casting director to see me that way. And then I went in and I got the role. And then about 6 months later, I was approached by Funny or Die to do this skit that's kind of become infamous now, called Toys R Me. And as soon as I read the opening monologue, I said, I have to do this. And so now it's just kind of turned into, you know, I just keep putting out in the universe saying that that's what I want to do. And in the past month I did a guest spot on Wilfred. There's an Adult Swim show called NTSFSDSUV. And it's created by and starring Paul Scheer, who's also one of the stars of The League on FX. And it's a parody of all those CSI, NCSI crime shows. And then I just did was it last week or the week before? I did a skit on an IFC show called Comedy Bang Bang, which is kind of a parody of late night talk shows.
Is it what you thought it would be?
Doing comedy?
Yes, sir.
Well, it depends on what it is. I mean, once again, I'm an actor, not a comedian, so each role is different. I mean, for example, in Wilfred, I played a therapist. In NTSF, I'm not going to give you all of this. In NTSF, I actually played kind of a thuggish Guy Fieri wannabe, and it's an episode called Bar Wars.
I've heard from a lot of actors that we've interviewed that people have said that if you're doing drama versus comedy, comedy is extremely harder to do than drama. What would your take be?
For me, the work is almost the same. I mean, in other words, the way that I approach the work is almost the same. It's really about finding the character. It's not trying to be funny.
Right.
And then, finding the truth of the absurdity of whatever the characters of the situation is. So not being a comedian, sometimes I really have to rely on the writing being good. And then if it doesn't work, I'll talk to the writer about it.
So are you improvising too, being a comedic actor? You sitting down saying, okay, I can make this go this way or make this go this way?
Well, see, for me, once again, I wasn't trained in improv. I was trained more classically. So even though I can improv, I'm not like these, the people like, the stars of Saturday Night Live,
Right.
that crew. So I really rely a lot more on how good the writing is.
Because comedy opened up the doors for you with Danny DeVito, your production company that I read about, are you planning on doing more, or can you speak to that? I should ask, more productions on comedies or, behind the scenes? Is that something that interests you?
Once I feel like my career plateaued as I moved into Fringe, and feeling that I wanted more control of the kinds of stories that I wanted to be in and that I wanted to tell. And so for me, it's not about a genre in particular, it's about the quality. So I just love really well-written, character-driven stuff. So if it's comedic, or if it's dramatic, or if it's horror, I don't really care.
I understand. Can you talk about, before we wind out, can you tell us about some future projects that you have on tap that you can talk about, that your production company is doing, and that you're also going to be in?
There's a film that I co-produced that Danny DeVito directed called Saint Sebastian, that also stars, that I co-star in with William Fichtner and Constance Zimmer, and that's a horror thriller. And that's still in post-production, so I'm not sure when that's going to be released.
Thank you for taking out the time.
Thank you.